When I saw the making my art into a loading screen trend, I thought, yeah, I could do that. But I have no animation experience. I wanted to introduce my characters to the world and thought that this would be a fun way to do it while gaining some new skills. Except I have exams this month, putting me at a 2-week time limit to animate 3 loading screens when I've never animated before. What on earth was I thinking? The guidelines for this are on the screen now, but the basics are that Silvie's would be the most complex. Then I'd have Lydia and Evan's, which would thankfully be so much more simpler. I thought that it would only take about 5 hours per character to do their full animations, sound design and overall editing, but yeah, you'll see how close I was to that estimation at the end of the video. Now, let's begin the video with Silvie. Except I'm still a beginner artist, so I faced hurdles practically before the challenge had even begun. I'm not very good at drawing poses, even with references, so there were quite a few time-sinking attempts. This wasn't helped by how, when I started the challenge, I thought that I could just use keyframes on Vinci Resolve and that would be all the animating I would do. Unfortunately for me, that ended up not being the case, because it looked awful. I'd never used keyframes before, as you can see, so it really did not go well. Eventually, I gave up and went traditional, digitally hand animating the entire thing. Starting with the flower shot, which, despite being a 1-second clip, took an hour and 40 minutes to do. This is precisely why I wanted to do the animating on Vinci Resolve. Anyway, this simple daisy animation actually took a decent amount of prep work, as nothing in this clip is random. Each of my OCs have an associated flower. Silvie's flower is the daisy, as her happiness lasts forever, even when it's unwanted. Not sure how it is elsewhere, but in the UK, daisies are generally seen as weeds, so I saw this as quite fitting for her. She also loves gardening, so it made sense for her to have a flower being the first thing you saw in the animation. Moving on to the next shot, the close-up. To do this, I decided that instead of drawing a close-up and then doing a whole new drawing for the third shot which showed her full body, I would just do one full body drawing and zoom into it a lot for the close-up shot. Thankfully, this actually worked quite well, ignoring how long it took to do the full body pose, but we're going to get to that later. I really struggled with the face, as I'd never drawn a head at this angle before, and I'm in a weird art style limbo at the moment, so that certainly did not help. Eventually, I figured it out, and to combat the quality loss from sizing up the image, I added more detail to the hair specifically. I think this made it look a lot less blurry. Finally, the full body. As said previously, this took a long time. I'm talking 4 hours long for this. The issue I was having is that the legs and feet would be at the wrong angle. I mean, what is this? Are her legs broken? In fact, I generally had issues with her floating, like the hands, which were redrawn numerous times. When all of these issues were finally figured out, I decided that I wanted some animation in this shot, specifically the hair and the grass. For this, I digitally hand animated it again, using Ibis Paint's animation tool. I considered animating on Clip Studio Paint, but I just couldn't figure out how to make that work. It'd keep giving an error after a few layers were added, and that just annoyed me. I also couldn't figure out how to add multiple layers to one frame when drawing, so I firmly ruled that out. The hair animation was quite straightforward though. It was just a looping animation of the hair flipping around in the wind. To transition between each character, they had custom transitions. For Silvie, as she's heavily inspired by the long-tailed tip bird, I wanted to imply that the bird was flying across the scene. It's a pretty lazy transition, but I think it should work just fine, as if this would only flash on screen for not even a second. I didn't put much effort into this, only drawing some coloured lines rather than a full long-tailed tip bird. Because of this, the transition was actually the fastest thing to draw, taking just a minute. With that, we can finally move on to Lydia. Guess in the comments how long you think it took for me to create each character's animation before the final reveal at the end of the video. As I said at the start, Lydia's animation would be much simpler, with only 2 key things happening. As an alchemist, I wanted her to be at a cauldron, making some potions for her next mission. I'm still not entirely sure of her personality and gave her a pretty generic animation. She would add some mystery ingredient to her potion, making it overflow. This overflow would act as the transition to the next character, Evan. But sticking to Lydia for now, I wasn't sure how I wanted to achieve this. Therefore, I decided to make a full drawing of what the starting frame would look like so I could see all of the moving parts. I also took a couple face reaction references, which was quite fun. What wasn't fun was how annoying this hand was. I ended up taking a reference photo for it, trying to use that, but failing miserably and finally just giving up and tracing it on another file to be imported into the main run. Otherwise, this drawing was actually quite smooth sailing, especially considering all of the issues I had with Silvie's one. However, as always, there is one big problem. The animation was only a second long. Even after I had added stuff to improve pacing and increase the total time, it was still only a second long. This meant that my lovely plan of having one super simple animation for Lydia and Evan needed to change. I decided that Lydia's second animation should be of her throwing a potion, which then explodes, creating the transition to Evan. I got a bit lazy at this point since I did not want to draw a full body, considering just how long it took for me to make Silvie's full body alone, ignoring all of her other animations. This was especially the case as I only had 4 days left to finish this challenge, and I'd done effectively nothing with Evan's section at this point. You heard that right, 4 days. Fortunately, this animation wasn't too bad. Unfortunately, I had to draw 2 new poses for her, which wasn't great, but otherwise it went fine. Except this animation was even shorter at 20 milliseconds, not even a second long. This meant, you guessed it, I had to stop Lydia's animation there rather than keep going because I would be insane if I did any more animation for her. Oh, who am I kidding? I did more animation for her. I decided to make the second animation longer rather than start a whole new run. I really wanted to move on to Evan at this point as the clock was ticking. By this time, I only had 3 days left to finish. Thankfully, this worked out in the end so I could finally start Evan's animation. I had actually started Evan's animation before Lydia's, but chose to make his last as I deemed his as the easiest to make out of the 3. The basics of his is that as a part of an elite defense force, he would be on lookout, guarding a giant manor. Eventually, you as a viewer would step on a twig, making a noise which he would hear, attacking you instantly. The magic light thing coming at you would be the transition, ending the animation. Yay! His only needed 1 basic pose, which I was incredibly grateful for, considering I only had 1 day left to finish this challenge. Where does the time go? I made 2 drafts of the manor that he'd protect, but ended up choosing the first one, as I didn't want it to feel like a castle. Instead, I wanted it to feel more of like an old English manor, kind of like the Buckingham Palace to an extent. Thankfully, Evan only needed 1 animation, which sped up the process massively. Finally, we can get on to the editing. Ha! You thought we'd be done at just the animation stages? No, we've got music and sound effects to add. Silvie's section is unique, with multiple different animation types used. For her, I intended on using keyframes so that she'd come into the scene, but chose on cutting to the next shot instead. While I was experimenting, I truly had no idea what I was doing, which caused a lot of frustration. This was the point I decided to digitally hand animate everything. However, this also came with its own issues. I'm still new to Vinci Resolve, so I had basically no idea what I was doing. Reoccurring theme here. I ended up reanimating Silvie's final animation because I couldn't figure out how to get rid of the background color outline, which really annoyed me, but otherwise this was a smooth process. Lydia and Evan's editing process was significantly easier, with just drag and dropping the files onto the timeline and adding music and sound effects. And with that, we've got the final animation. I finished this at 1:30 AM, meaning I didn't quite meet my goal of completing it within 2 weeks, but the difference is so insignificant I'm just going to ignore that. At the beginning of the video, I said that I thought it would take about 5 hours per character. The real length of each character and the time taken in total is within the description. The whole reason I did this challenge, despite having literally no animation experience, was because, be it making a plushie or a keychain, I've always wanted to do things with my OCs. But with the current state of online art trends, I never really found anything that I thought was achievable for a beginner artist like me that I could do with my OCs on a budget, until finally the turning my art into a loading screen trend appeared. I've liked animation for a while. My favourite piece of media is actually Freerun Beyond Journey's End, but I've never actually tried it before. When this trend appeared, I decided that this would be my time to try it. If I didn't like it, then that's fine. I'd move on to something else. My next video is actually going to be some silly arts and crafts in my OCs, so clearly I've got options. Thinking about what I've done now, it may not look professional by any means. Heck, to some it might look quite ugly because of my poor fundamental knowledge. But at the end, at least I tried. If you like my work, you can buy my prints and stickers on my Etsy for now. I'm planning to ditch Etsy since it's actually driving me insane, but that'll be a video for the future. I hope you enjoyed the video and my animating shenanigans. If you did, please like and subscribe. It truly has an impact. I've got more content about my OCs coming up, so if you like this, you'll probably like that as well.